Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I am here today again with another solo episode as we're going to be closing out the year with solo episodes. I've got a few great guest episodes lined up for early in the new year, but for now, you get me. And as today is December 16th, and before I am dropping back in with you, we will have had the winter solstice, Yule. I am recording an episode all about the energies of the winter solstice, the history, the significance, and a little bit of Yuletide cheer. If you've been with me on this journey for very long, you'll know that I may just like Yule even more than Samhain. It's a hard one to decide. There's something really beautiful about Samhain, that energy of entering into the darkness, of beginning the new year in terms of that Celtic calendar, beginning with the dark. But there's something extra magical in my experience of Yule and Yuletide. And it probably comes from the fact that I've always loved Christmas as a child. I loved the gathering, the twinkling lights, the gift giving, buying gifts for others, watching their delight as they open them, the coming together of families to share in food and merriment. My family had some really lovely traditions growing up, things like going caroling door to door with a big group of folks, having our big Christmas dinners with several families. Often there were upwards of 20 people sitting at our extended long table for Christmas dinner. Just the magic of creeping down the stairs in the morning to find gifts beneath the tree, even though I haven't believed in Santa since I was about 2 years old. And I asked my mom how we got into our house because we didn't have a chimney, and she told me the truth. I think in some ways I prefer it that way because the magic was still there for me. I do remember a few times wistfully wishing with my friends on Christmas Eve as we gathered and they were looking out the window and like, oh my gosh, I can see Rudolph's nose. And me getting excited along with them while there was a little voice in my head saying, it's not real, it's not real. It kind of like the same wistfulness or wishing I often had as a young woman when it came to religion and the comfort that others gained from having faith, being, going to church, having that belief in a God. And there was this part of me that thought, it would be really lovely to believe, but I just don't. And so that's my relationship with Santa. And that part of the magic still doesn't lessen the amount that I loved the day, doesn't lessen the excitement, the coming downstairs with my sister. When she came along, we'd get up before my parents and creep down those stairs to open our stockings. That's what tided us over so that my parents could sleep in a little bit before we had breakfast, before we got to the main event. And that magic, that joy, that sparkle, that sense of community and coming together and connection are still what I love the most about this season. And When I started to follow the wheel of the year, when I started to learn about the celebrations around the wheel and learn about the history and the traditions of Yuletide and the winter solstice, it was really cool to have some connection to where so many of our traditions come from, right? There's a lot of crossover between different traditions. There's a lot of traditions that come from Christianity. There's a lot of traditions that Christianity co-opted and wove or folded into their own practice. But throughout the Northern Hemisphere, there are celebrations, historical celebrations around the winter solstice. The winter solstice this year greets us. I mean, the actual moment of solstice is 2 a.m. Mountain Time on the 21st. So 20th, 21st is our winter solstice this year. It is the shortest day of the year, the longest night. And that word Yule, which is associated with this time, is derived from an ancient Norse word or celebration, Yule, Jul in that case, meaning wheel. But as I said, many peoples through time have celebrated this solar event. So it's one of those solar days in the Celtic calendar. We have the equinoxes and the solstices, which are all solar events timed based around the sun. And evidence goes back to the Stone Ages of celebrations around this time. The Romans celebrated Saturnalia at this point. Yuletide was really the name of the whole season of winter, December and January, in much of Europe. And then, of course, Christmas is the Christian celebration of the birth of the sun, S-O-N. But of course, it is so closely tied to the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N, because a lot of what people were celebrating at this moment is that promise of the return of the light. You may have heard me speak back at the summer solstice about the battle between the Holly King and the Oak King. And so at the summer solstice, the Holly King is said to have defeated the Oak King. The Holly King rules the night, the Oak King rules the day. And at the summer solstice, the Holly King wins the battle and the days start getting shorter. Those nights that he has won become longer and longer. And then with the winter solstice, we have the Oak King in legend or myth defeating the Holly King and heralding or shepherding in the returning light, the lengthening days, allowing that sun to return. And it's such a joyful time of year of celebration, an honoring of the sacred dark, and a knowing that the light will begin to return. Winter is a time when the earth has gone dormant. And for most of us today, we mark the beginning of winter, the first day of winter, as the winter solstice. It is midwinter in the Celtic calendar. However, depending where you are in the world, it probably feels like it is just becoming winter. Not where I am. It's definitely been winter since October. Well, end of October. It was a late winter for us, actually. But this time of year, it's a time when the earth is dormant, plants have died back, leaves have fallen, bears are in hibernation. It's a time of darkness, of turning inward, of solitude, but also of connection and of deep reflection. Of course, for our ancestors, it would also have been a time of some uncertainty, of that hope that enough stores had been put by to get them through the long, cold months ahead. And in medieval times, and probably prior to that as well, it was also a time where another slaughter of livestock would happen as the stores began to dwindle, culling back the herds so that they could keep enough animals alive to perpetuate those stocks in the summer or in the spring months, but not so many that they ran out of food for the animals. And so there was this opportunity to feast in the winter, in the middle of the long dark. And so that's a big part of what solstice celebrations are for many traditions as well. It's also one of the most ancient solar festivals that we have record of, right? That we have some documentation around. Even though it's hard to trace, as all old things are, we do think that it began with that Norse celebration thousands of years ago. But themes of light and fire and feasting, much like all of the Celtic Wheel of the Year celebrations, are very present. Another thing that happens around this time is what's known as the cold moon. That's a Mohawk term, so North American indigenous peoples, there's different names for these moons, but the full moon in December, the last full moon of the calendar year, also called the long night moon, so you're seeing that reference to the solstice, is the last full moon. It's also usually cold, which is where the cold moon name comes from. And in Europe, pagans would call December full moon the moon before Yule. Although I'm not sure what they called it when it fell after the 21st. And maybe it was just that was the moon, the last full moon right before Yule, that was marked because the solar calendar was less followed than the lunar calendar. Anyways, I'm not sure there entirely. However, something that's really cool is that it is visible in the sky for more time than any other moon of the year. It's actually something that happens throughout the year. The shorter the sun is in the sky, the longer the moon is in the sky, the way that arch happens. So we have a really long full moon. When you're listening to this, that full moon will already have passed. It's happening on the 15th. So the night before you are hearing this, if you're listening on a Monday, but you can still harness the energies of this full moon for yourself within a few days. So don't be surprised if perhaps you, even though we've got long dark nights, maybe you're not sleeping quite as well. It's that full moon energy. I'm not going to go into what this full moon means for us so much in this episode, but go listen to Chani. She's got a free app or a free podcast rather with the astrology of the week ahead. And if you're looking for a little astro support, it's one of the few apps I pay for that I really, really suggest. I'm not an affiliate. I simply love the way that she decodes the astrology for us. So Yule and Yuletide, the actual moment of solstice, there's so many different ways to celebrate here. We have, the Yule log, that's an ancient tradition. Decorating a tree, that used to happen outside. It's an ancient Germanic kind of area of the world traditions. These things were not specifically associated with Christmas until later on. Bringing in evergreen boughs into the home to decorate. Again, it's this promise of the green of spring and growing things again. It's bringing some of that summer energy into the dark with us. And it's a really beautiful time of year to reflect on the year gone by, on what you have achieved and overcome. It's also a really beautiful time to work with the ancestors. And we talked a lot about this at Samhain. And we're still in the season of Samhain. If you've been with me and you're following, Samhain is the season of winter in the Celtic calendar. Sometimes it's just considered to be the name for November. Sometimes it's referred to as this whole kind of season from October 31st through to February 1st when spring or Imbolc begins. And so we still have the same seasonal energies as we did at Samhain and a lot of connection to ancestors. We have so many traditions. I speak a lot about the importance of ritual and ceremony and tradition in weaving more meaning and potency through our lives. And this is one of the few times of year where our culture really does have quite a few traditions. Most people have family traditions associated with this time of year. We have cultural celebrations. It really does carry a lot more ritual significance than a lot of other times of year. And many of those rituals, many of those traditions, celebrations are very tied to our ancestors, right? They're handed down through the generations, passed down to us from our forebears. And so a really lovely thing to do at this time of year is to connect explicitly with those ancestors. And perhaps that's by cooking the foods they used to cook. I always make my grandmother's shortbread cookies at this time of year and my great-grandmother's plum pudding sauce, which is seriously like crack. It's so freaking delicious. But connecting with my maternal lineage that way has always been really important to me. For Christmas dinner, when we're celebrating at my parents' house, my mom always uses my grandmother's china. There's all of these connections, even the way in which we do Christmas morning. what we eat, the foods we eat, with whom we eat them. All of these are ways of connecting with our ancestors. And it's also a beautiful time of year to do some reflecting on what traditions feel really good and nourishing and you want to bring forward, and perhaps which ones don't suit, right? Sometimes we get stuck in these traditions and it has to be this way because it's always been this way, and we forget to ask why or if it's actually working for us. And so it's a good time of year as well to perhaps create your own family traditions, your own family rituals to imbue this time of year with meaning for you that makes sense today for your specific family situation. And if you're letting go of older rituals or traditions, perhaps taking a moment to pay homage to where those traditions came from, why they were a part of your family for so long, and thanking those ancestors for bequeathing them to you, whether or not you're carrying them forward. I think that I talked also at Samhain about the idea of leaving a chair by the hearth and writing a letter to the ancestors. And I have this tradition, this ritual idea from Jennifer Murphy of the Celtic Creatives. I'm part of her Substack community and have been part of some of her courses, and I love her writing and her offerings. I've learned a lot of what I know about my own Celtic history and these Wheel of the Year celebrations and the deities and all of that from her. And she spoke again about this tradition of putting a chair by the hearth, by the fire in your home. If you don't have a fire, then putting a chair near a candle, having that candle lit through the evening, and writing a letter to your ancestor or ancestors that you might want to communicate with, to share what's happening in your life, to thank them for any wisdom that you receive from them, perhaps to ask them for guidance in your dreams, and then having a journal, something with you to take to bed so that you can record any dreams you might have as soon as you wake up. And then also in the morning, going down and sitting with that chair, with that space where you invited the ancestors in, and journaling some more and seeing what comes through and what you receive. Obviously, being careful if you do not have an enclosed fireplace, or if you're lighting candles, that you're being fire safe and you're blowing those candles out before dinner or before bedtime. Honoring too that fear and uncertainty that they would have potentially had if we go back far enough, that we didn't have, the safety of a grocery store with food in it and of electricity grids that keep our homes heated. Other things to incorporate, to bring in around Yule, sitting with those themes of darkness, of death, and of deep hibernation. We are still very much journeying with the Cailleach, the old crone or the old hag of winter, and all of her beautiful, wise, deep energies. It's the season of the crone, the hag, or of death if we're looking seasonally. It's new moon energy, hibernation energy, but sitting with those themes, but also because it is one of those solar moments in the calendar where the balance tips, celebrating the returning of the light. And that's we bring in candles and fireplaces and all of the greenery to help celebrate the returning of the light. It's a great time of year as well to set intentions or desires for the coming year, though it's not a great time to be figuring out all the ins and outs of the hows of things. So just allowing yourself to dream. Perhaps it's a time where you want to drop into my word of the year visualization to choose yourself an anchor point to move into 2025 with. I'll drop the link in the show notes for sure. Great time to celebrate with family and friends, do some feasting, decorate a Yule log, gather round to tell stories, go caroling, make crafts. All of these things are beautiful practices, wrapping gifts, delivering goodies to friends, neighbors, loved ones. There's so much richness in this season, in this celebration, in this festival. It's a really beautiful time, as I mentioned, to do some reflecting on the year gone by and do some intention setting for the year ahead. And with that in mind, I have created a really limited offer. I really felt the call to help folks drop in, connect with where they've been, connect with some of that internal magic, connect with where they want to go, drop into some deep healing, some energetic work for the end of the year to clear the way for the new year. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the Gregorian calendar, as you will know if you've been with me for a while, I do recognize that there is a real energy about this time of year because our whole society is based on a Gregorian calendar. So this is more of it's not like a seize 2025, it's more of a soften into 2025, clear the ground for that fertility that is coming, do some visioning, do some card pulling, all of that jazz. Calling it a VIP day for lack of a better word, but if you are interested, I only have 5 spaces available. Please just reach out, Eileen at myluminouslife.ca, and let me know that you're interested. I'll send you all the details, no pressure, but we can chat about how that support might really help you in this transition, especially in some real replenishment after the holiday season. Because as beautiful as this season is, it's also a really full, busy time of year. It can feel overwhelming. There's lots of emotions. There's lots of family dynamics you might be navigating. And so I also encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't yet, about having some energetic boundaries and clearing and cleansing practices for the holiday season. And even with those practices in place, there's a good chance that come, the 27th, you're going to feel the need for a little bit of deeper cleansing, a little bit of deeper nourishment and replenishment and support. And so I have 5 of these half-day, deep dive, beautiful, juicy VIP days to offer. And if one of them is yours, reach out, let me know, ask for more questions, ask for all the details. Again, no pressure if you reach out and the details don't work for you. That is 100% fine. I wanted to leave you with a poem before I end today's episode. And this poem is called The Shortest Day by Susan Cooper. I read it during our solstice ceremony last year, and I will likely read it again this year, which, before I forget, please, if you have not joined for Yule or signed up for the Yule ceremony, we're gathering this Friday evening. It's hybrid, online and in person. I've got so many folks who said to me multiple times how the online experience really just feels like you're sitting in the room with us. I know sometimes those hybrid experiences can be not the most amazing. So I've really asked for a lot of feedback from those who tend to join me online, and they keep coming back and they keep saying it's great. So this is my proof that it is. That ceremony is happening at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7:15 start for those online. And again, the link will be below. It's sliding scale, pay what you can. The ceremony will also be recorded in case you can't attend live. I don't record the discussion that occurs after for privacy reasons, but I do record the actual ceremony piece where I talk about the history, the traditions. Some of it will be what I've spoken about today, but there's more that I add into that particular space, and then obviously walking you through the ceremonial aspects of that as well. So please come join us. I would love to have you there for this, my probably favorite Wheel of the Year ceremony. And without further ado, I'm going to read this poem to wrap up today's episode. I think I'm just going to hit stop when I'm done. And so, as always, if you like this episode, please leave a rating, leave a review if you haven't done so yet. It helps ever so much for this show to get discovered. Please share with any friend you think might enjoy my ramblings and information here. I appreciate you all so very much. Wishing you a blessed Yule. This is The Shortest Day by Susan Cooper. So the shortest day came and the year died. And everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing, to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing the same delight this shortest day as promise wakens in the sleeping land. They carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends and hope for peace. And so do we, here, now, this year, and every year. Welcome, Yule.